Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Hello, my name is Osha Rose, and I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator here at the library. We are so happy to have Adam Clark with us today. He is a naturalist, a biologist. He's from Reading, and he's also the son of our Assistant Director, Tom Clark. So he, being so passionate about bats, nature, and all things wild, we are just so excited to have him share with us today about bats. So welcome, Adam.
All right, testing this. Can everyone hear me okay at all? We good? Okay. So thank you everyone for coming. As Osha said, I'm Adam Clark, and I'll be sharing with you a few things about bats today. I think they're amazing, and I hope you guys do too by the end of this. So to start off with, simply, what are bats? Put in simple terms, bats are flying mammals. They're the only flying mammals that we have on Earth as of today. Some people might think the flying squirrel flies. They actually do not. They just glide, so they're kind of cheating. But bats are our only true flying mammals. And to classify them, they are in the class Mammalia, so they are mammals just like us. They've got fur, external ears. They give birth to live young, just like we do. And to break it down even more, they're in the order Chiroptera, big fancy Latin term there. That's the order of animals that includes all kinds of bats, from megabats, the gigantic fruit bats, to our microbats, our smaller bats that we have around here in New England. And one thing also to note about bats, most bat species are nocturnal, so they're much more active at night and they sleep during the daytime. That's also a strong distinguishing feature of bats. But there are also some bats, like fruit bats in the tropics, that are diurnal. So these, I'll let you know, these two bats we've got here on top. This is the scary vampire bat that we do not have around here, which some of you might be relieved to know. They do drink blood from some animals. They don't suck blood like a vampire, but they might pierce a little hole in you when you're sleeping and sip the blood that comes out. And the one we have down here, this is a big brown bat, which I'll talk about a little later. This is a very common species that we have here in Massachusetts, and I'm sure you guys have seen them around, but I'll get into that a little later. So where can I find bats? Also put simply, just about everywhere. So bat species are found worldwide in temperate, mixed climate regions like where we are up here, to tropical regions near the equator in South America, Africa, Australia, India, you name it. So bats do not love the cold weather, so at the North and South Pole is not the place you'd find them. And so they all species have different habitat characteristics, but typically a lot of them, no matter where they are in the world, during warmer seasons at least, will roost in trees or tree cavities, like this little eastern red bat here we've got that's clinging to an oak leaf with its back claws. And this fruit bat here we have on the island of American Samoa in the Pacific. So two very different environments, but from New England here on the left to the South Pacific on the right. So bats are found pretty much everywhere. And in colder or temperate regions where we do have bats, one common feature is that they will all pretty much spend the winter in caves where it keeps them warm. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So just to get into a little bit of the morphology of bats, this could be a whole presentation in itself, but just to go over some basics. So when you're looking at the bat wing here, this area, this webbing, is called the patagium. It's a very thin membrane that extends between the fingers of the bats. So when we actually look at the bat wing, we're looking at an arm and then the fingers. So it's almost like an arm and a hand that we're seeing. We've got the third, fourth, and fifth digit here, and this thumb, which is actually a claw that helps them cling to the surface of trees or caves. And of course, we have the tragus, or the inner ear, or the pinnae, the external ear that helps them hear and navigate their environment. Bats have incredible hearing. And if we're looking down closer to the south end of the bat, we've got the tail. Of course, that's connected by the uropatagium right here. That's the thin membranous structure that connects the legs to the tail. And their body is almost completely webbed if you look at them, and this is very helpful for maneuverability in flight, especially when hunting. And we'll get into that momentarily. So, what do bats eat? Well, bats eat a wide variety of many things. Up here, our bats primarily are insectivores, so they're eating insects like this winter moth here. So that could be anything from moths, mosquitoes, beetles, stink bugs, you name it. They love insects. But there are also, of course, the fruit bats like we've got here, mostly down in the tropics, that primarily eat fruit. So these guys, they're not hunters. They're eating all sorts of fruit, mangoes, bananas, dates, whatever region they're in. And here we've got bats that also eat, or not eat, they drink nectar. So this guy here is a Costa Rican orange bat, or Costa Rican orange nectar bat. And they only feed on the nectar of flowering plants. So that big tongue, almost like the proboscis of a bee or butterfly, goes right down into the opening of the flower and scoops out nectar. So there are a lot of bats that feed like that as well. And of course, very surprisingly, there are some bats that will attack and catch fish as well. So I'll show you guys a quick video on that to show the fishing bat. I get some ads.
For bats, smaller prey is usually more manageable. Fishing bats use echolocation to direct them. The sense of sound can guide them so well that they can hear fish surfacing in a pond. They use that sound, plus echolocation, to time their dive to the exact moment a fish rises close enough to the surface. In an impressive display of timing and winged agility, the bat skims the water, picking off fish with its long legs and claws. Using echolocation and otherworldly hearing, a bat like this one can catch and consume up to 30 fish in a single night.
So I've got another quick video here to illustrate the nectar feeding bats now. Let's see.
This is the Pinacate Desert, one of Mexico's driest and most hostile landscapes. The last place one would think might appeal to migrants. Yet hidden deep in the bowels of this volcanic cave, protected from the searing heat above, is a refuge for more than 300,000 female, lesser long-nosed bats. After mating in southern Mexico in winter, they followed a nectar trail of blossoming cactus flowers north for 1,000 miles until arriving in the Pinacate Desert. Here, hidden beneath the earth, they give birth. This dark, humid cave keeps their young cool in the day and warm at night. 40 feet off the ground, these 2 week-old pups huddle together, safely out of reach from any predators. Too young to fly, the pups rely completely on their mother's milk. To keep up their supply, the females must feed every night. Nearly 50 miles from the cave, they find what they've been looking for: the night bloom of a large saguaro cactus. Each sweet-smelling blossom opens its milk-white petals for only one night of the year. Like a hummingbird, the long-nosed bat hovers in front of the flowers, using her long nose and tongue to lap up the sugary nectar inside. Each female must visit up to 100 flowers every night to produce enough milk for her pup. As she feeds, she pollinates. If this mutually beneficial relationship breaks, neither could survive. The bats will remain here until late summer, when their young will wean and the wilting cactus flowers trigger their return south.
All right. So moving on to echolocation. So the way bats echolocate is that they're able to produce these very high squeaks, these very high frequency sounds from their vocal cords out into the environment around them, so that when the sound waves hit an object, they'll bounce back toward the bat and towards its very sensitive ears, and that tells the bat what the environment around it is like. So it'll tell the bat if it's about to fly into a tree, a wall, a rock, or if there's a small animal like a moth in front of it that could be prey. And of course, it also helps them detect for any predators in the area that are larger than itself, or other bats around it. And contrary to popular belief, bats are not actually blind. Their eyesight is not too far off from ours, actually, but of course we cannot see that well at night, so neither can they. So they have to rely on this echolocation to help navigate their environment and to find food. So this video here also helps show an interesting finding with echolocation. Let's see. Come on. All right.
This slow-motion video of a bat drinking from a pool of water was made by German scientists Stefan Greif and Bjorn Siemers. The pair set out to investigate the sensory cues that help animals recognize features in their environment. In this case, the ponds and rivers that bats use for orientation and foraging. We know a lot about how bats use echolocation to target insect-sized objects. But this is the first study to show how they recognize large, flat objects like ponds. Stefan and Bjorn caught wild bats in Bulgaria and tested them in a large, dark flight room. They presented the bats with either smooth or textured plates, positioned on the flight room's sandy floor. When presented with a smooth plate of metal, the bats treated it like water and tried to drink. Even when the metal plate was put on a table a very unnatural position for a pond, the researchers watched as the bats attempted to quench their thirst. A smooth metal plate reflects sound in the same way as a body of water, so this behaviour supported the researchers' hypothesis that bats rely on the mirror-like echo-reflection properties of smooth surfaces to recognise water in their environment. When a bat flies above a smooth surface, most of the sound waves in its call are reflected away, but a small proportion hit the surface immediately below and then bounce back, a telltale sign of water if you're a bat. Stefan and Bjorn also tested young bats that had never encountered a pond or river before. These naive bats also tried to drink from the metal plate. This was the first time in their lives these youngsters had encountered a large, smooth surface. So this suggests that water recognition in bats is hardwired into the brain. And the researchers claim this is the first evidence for innate recognition of a habitat cue, such as a pond, in a mammal.
Yeah, so that, I thought that was kind of interesting how these bats thought that that was a pond they were drinking of. So these poor little thirsty bats did not get what they wanted, but it goes to show how they use echolocation even to see the surface of water, because they drink right from the surface of water as they fly over. You know, they can't drink like a deer and stand by, and, you know, they'll get picked off like that. But here's another one that shows them hunting food. We could actually hear the clicks in this one that bats produce to find food. So another interesting thing about the skin membrane around their tail, the uropatagium, for catching smaller insects, they use that almost like a net to kind of scoop them towards themselves, and then they tilt their head down and grab that insect in their teeth. And of course, this video is slowed down a lot. In reality, this would take place in a split second. They don't always succeed. Okay. So here in Massachusetts, we have actually 9 species of bats that will live here, migrate through. But for now, I thought I would just focus on the 2 most common species we had. So as mentioned a little while before, this is the big brown bat down here. The Latin name, I can barely pronounce it, Eptisicus fuscus. Their wingspan could be almost 1.5 feet in length, which seems very big, but as they're flying a couple hundred feet over you, it's hard to see just how big they are unless you happen to have caught one in the hand. And here they primarily live in deciduous forests, so forested areas where the leaves fall annually. Those are typically the kinds of forests you'd find these bats in, either roosting on the inside of dead trees that have hollowed out or underneath any loose bark. And out west, not as much here, but if you go west to like Utah, Arizona, you'll see them more in mountains or desert area. And when I say conservation status, that means how are they doing as a population? Are they declining, increasing, at risk of extinction? So for big brown bats, they're least concern, meaning there are many of them out there. Nobody's worried about them. In fact, their populations, for reasons not known, are actually increasing. So the big brown bat is doing great. Little brown bat here on the right, not doing as great. You'll still find them across North America, including Massachusetts, but their populations are declining. So for that reason, considering how quickly they're declining, scientists have classified them as endangered. So there is concern as to what their future populations are going to look like. And their scientific name, Myotis lucifugus, and they can be up to 11 inches in length, their wingspan, so kind of big, but not as big as the other brown bat. But like the brown bat, you'll also see them in forested areas, often in suburbs, wetlands, over fields. So they're found in a wide variety of environments. So if we get into the migration of these bats, typically a lot of our bats here in Massachusetts will, unlike birds that fly south for the winter, these guys will fly west. So just west of us in the Berkshires, in western Mass, the Green Mountains in Vermont, or the Adirondacks up here in New York, that's where a lot of our bats will go to spend the winter because there are so many different caves here. And because their body heat, they, like many small mammals, they don't retain body heat very well, so they need to find a warm shelter to stay warm for the winter. So millions of these bats will take refuge in these caves. And, once the winter picks up, their body will go into torpor. So their heartbeat will decline very rapidly. Their heartbeat can be easily over 100 beats per minute. But once they go into torpor, a form of hibernation, their heartbeat could be 10 beats per minute. So it drops down significantly so that their body is not expending a lot of energy, keeps their metabolism low, so that these bats could stay relatively inactive through the winter so that they can make it to spring. So just to talk about the ecological importance of bats, or the environmental importance of bats. So why do we need bats? Who cares? So as mentioned before, there are many bat species that feed on nectar, and in doing so, that helps pollinate many plant species. Like the saguaro cactus in the Southwest, many of those are pollinated by the lesser long-nosed bat that was mentioned in the video a little while ago. And this cactus almost solely depends on this bat for pollination and reproduction so that new saguaro cacti can grow. And because the saguaro cactus is a very important resource for many animals in the Southwest, many animals will feed on them, use it as habitat. So the lesser long-nosed bat is very integral to keeping up those cactus populations in the desert. Also, I put in mangoes here. There are, in many tropical environments where there are fruit bats, there are many fruit crops that do depend on the pollination and seed dispersal. There are bats that they help in seed dispersal. So for like mangoes, kiwi, bananas, fruit bats will help disperse those seeds and create new generations of those plants. And especially in parts of Africa, there's the straw-colored fruit bat, which is this goofy-looking guy right here. They feed on the fruits of many trees, including the baobab, and they're one of the biggest pollinators and, in fact, the strongest, like no other animal helps regrow the forest in parts of Central and Western Africa like fruit bats do. In fact, like here we have gray squirrels that help regrow forests and start new generations of trees. These bats do the same thing in Africa as they feed on fruit. And of course, we love and need bats because they're an important pest controller. So an individual bat can easily eat over 1,000 mosquitoes in a single night, which is fantastic because who likes mosquitoes? I don't. And of course, mosquitoes they're a health hazard for people. We've definitely had cases of triple E on the North Shore, and rather than spraying chemicals to control them, we could just rely on bats to help keep those mosquito numbers low. So bats have had a complicated history with us. There are a number of threats that bats face today. most notably the white nose syndrome. So this is a fungal disease that infects bats. Its true scientific name here, I can barely pronounce it, Pseudogymnoascus destructans, but we just call it white nose syndrome, of course. And it's a disease that originates in bats in Europe, so it actually does not affect bats over there. But it's believed that people visiting North America from Europe have actually unintentionally had these seeds or these spores of the fungus on their clothing after visiting caves in Europe. And then when they come here, explore our caves, they inadvertently spread the fungal spores on the walls of the caves. So it's believed that that's how the fungus was first spread to bats in North America. And it was first detected roughly in the early 2000s, I believe in upstate New York, in the Adirondacks area. And over time, over several years, there have been severe declines in bat populations, up to 90% across the country. Oftentimes, scientists would explore caves and they would see dead bats just littered on the cave floor. And for a while, people didn't know why, but after examining some of the bats, they realized that this fungus was growing on them, disturbing their hibernation, making them wake up and be active during the winter, expend energy when they're not supposed to, and millions of these bats just ended up dying in the winter time. Additionally to white nose syndrome, there are concerns about pesticides, most notably in agriculture, where a lot of farmers, out of necessity in many cases, they have to spray their crops with certain pesticides, fungicides, to keep their crops healthy, free of insects, free of fungal diseases. But it's believed that that has also had an impact on bat populations, their health, and their ability to reproduce. So it's something that's still being investigated by certain scientists, but it's believed that that's also having a big impact on them as well. And of course, lastly, if we get to climate change, we hear that one a lot. That one is still not fully understood, but it's believed that climatic changes may alter the timing that bats will, it alters when they will start to make their winter migration. And if they go too early, they might not have the fat reserves yet to survive the winter. Or if they go too late, then they might, a cold snap could certainly kill them. So climatic change is something, it's not fully understood, but is a potential concern when looking at the future of bats. So not to sound all doom and gloom, there is a little hope for bats out there. Recently, scientists, notably this biologist, Georgia Oteri from Missouri State University, she and another scientist in Pennsylvania have been investigating this chemical, this polyethylene glycol 800. And what they found is when they spray it along the inside of the walls of caves, it actually kills the fungal spores. So this is a very new practice, but it's showing to be very promising because it could actually eliminate the fungus if it has contaminated caves that bats use to winter in, and could potentially, be better for the bats' health and prevent future die-offs of these bats. So lastly, we're getting near the end here. I just wanted to show you this website here. This was a bat box I built seemingly 1 million years ago now, back in high school, in my local town forest in Reading to try to encourage bats to roost in the area. So if we go to this website here, this is Bat Conservation and Management. They do a lot of research with bats in terms of understanding the impacts construction can have, and also advising people on how they could better live with bats, making construction more sustainable so there's not as much of an impact. But what they've outlined here is a nice diagram that shows what color you should paint your bat box, depending on what region you're in. So here in the Southwest, where it's very light, a 4, of course, it's extremely hot down there, so you don't need to paint a bat box. It already heats up a lot because you don't want to be cooking those little bats in there. But up here in the Northeast, where we are, it's of course a little cooler. So it is recommended that if you do want to install a bat box, paint it either a dark brown or black so that it absorbs heat. So it will help keep those bats warm at night. And let's see. Yep. And here's another great website to use. So this is through Ohio State University, and they've a team of students, researchers came together and put this page to describe how to homeowners how to best manage your backyard as bat habitat if you're interested. It often describes if you have a wooded area to leave up dead trees because that's a great roosting cover for them to live inside in the summer. It also talks about having open ponded areas because, as we saw in that video, they love to fly down and drink from the surface of water. So it goes into all of this detail about how you can garden for bats, make your backyard more bat-friendly, which of course helps the populations of these bats long-term. So this is through Ohio State University, the Ohio Bat Working Group, if anyone is interested. And yeah, that is all. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope some of that resonated with you and you guys have a new appreciation for bats. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, thank you guys for coming today. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Number one, could you stand over this way a little bit because the light behind you, you
Yeah.
can't see your face.
Oh, you can't? Oh, I didn't know that.
You don't
Okay.
know who you really are.
Here, I'll stand.
Yeah.
Little bit.
Thank you, that's nice to see you.
For the spooky season, right?
And tell people, number one, why or how you got interested in this.
It was,
And,
yeah.
Tell us about your background a little bit, that's what I'm asking. Also, why bats? Out of
Why
everything
bats?
to choose, why did you choose bats?
So it's a good question. I guess just a little bit about my background. Really, I've always been interested in wildlife, nature, creepy crawlies out there. I do have a degree in wildlife biology from University of New Hampshire, a little ways north of us. And I've heard really learning about nature and ecosystems, I've learned that it's the little guys that make a difference. So bats, I think, are really an unsung hero in our ecosystems. In terms of eating mosquitoes, they beat birds completely. So for that reason, we need them. And it's just always been a fascination to me. Usually I've learned in nature, it's the ones you least expect that make the most difference. So I think that's really important in that regard. Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining these critters that we think are nasty. I think E.O. Wilson described the little things that run the world. And of course, that includes these. I was a little concerned about the polyethylene glycol. Is that any derivative of PCBs that they're using to get rid of the fungus?
That's a good question. I'm not
The
entirely
PCBs
sure.
are pretty
Yeah.
kind of chemicals.
Right, I could go back. There's
Well, I don't want to, it's probably
Yeah.
not, I can't believe that they would actually be,
it is something I was kind of thinking that too. Like, what is the compound, the chemical derivative of? Is there
Right.
a residual effect in that? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. This practice is very, very new. Like,
yeah,
as of a few years ago, they're still experimenting with it, not everywhere. So far, it's helped bats. survive and not get the fungus, but the impacts in other areas, like, is that getting onto the ground, leaching elsewhere, ground contamination, I'm not sure.
Do
if
they know what
the-
what causes the fungus?
It's a very small, like, it's not a bacteria, it's some kind of, it's really an infection, like something that gets onto their fur, around their eyes, nose.
Yeah.
It's, a lot of it is unknown. We know it came from Europe. That's really all we know about it, and it just spread like crazy
Yeah.
when it got here. So it makes the bats very sick when they get it. But it's, so far this is one of the practices that they're doing to help control it. But there is possible hope that these bats will just pick it eventually, because we know the bats in Europe, they're not immune to it, but they're not affected by it. So it's possible that here, going down the line, they might actually become immune. We haven't seen that a lot yet, but there's a hope for that. But right now, this is what's going on to try to help control that.
One thing that puzzled me was the bats in the area where the saguaro cacti were.
Yeah.
And if the cacti only bloom one night a year, and there are thousands of bats,
Yeah.
how is there enough food for them?
It's a good question. I don't entirely know. It is
There's gotta be a
possible.
lot of cacti.
There must be, yeah. There's got to be a lot of them. I also don't know how many bats survive as well. It's, the amount of food that's available does control the population, but the cactus are very large, so they might have a lot of blossoms out there. And of course, those bats are migratory, the lesser longnose, so they will, once they're done feeding at that time of year, they're gonna head south. So they're one of those bats that they don't stay in one spot; they keep moving.
Well, if they're migrating to someplace else, are those cacti in the other places too, or what are they eating when they go other places?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. There are, in the Southwest, you go down to Mexico, there are a lot of other flowering plants in the desert that have like different timings and when they bloom.
Okay.
So it's possible that, the bats are following that cycle. If this blooms farther south at this time, that's where the bats are going to go. And so I'm not entirely sure, but that's where
It's a good theory.
I assume, yeah. So I'm sure somebody has a good answer to that. But it's my guess. Yeah.
May I ask two questions?
Yeah, of course.
One is, do the bats around this area migrate to those same caves every year, like from Rockport to wherever?
I think there has been research on that, and in many cases they do. A lot of them will go back to the same cave system that they roosted in the year before. And these little bats, they could actually live, not all of them, but some up to 20 years. So they actually they will go back to the same area. Some individuals might veer off and, go on a trip somewhere else, but a lot of them usually stick to the same cave system that they were in before.
And my other question is the bats that are fishing.
Yeah.
Where do they live?
The fishing bats, they might, definitely tropical. We don't, not ones we have up here.
Okay.
It's possible either like Central or South America, Southeast Asia, one of those remote locations. Yeah, those we don't see those here. We just have the insect feeders. So. Good question though. Yep.
Do they have any predators like hawks or eagles or whatever?
Definitely, yeah. I ran out of time a little bit. I was going to include that. Definitely hawks and owls are big predators of them, especially eastern screech owls, the little guys. They'll definitely catch bats in flight. Sometimes when they're sleeping, raccoons will, grab them if they find them. Fishers may grab them as well, around here at least. But if you go into a more tropical area, snakes will grab bats as well. So they do have a lot of enemies, but they manage with it. the echolocation helps them, you know, avoid predators when they can. Any other questions? Yep. Bats fit into a bat house well? It's a great question you got there. So the ones it depends on the design you have. The ones that I used from Bat Conservation International can house up to 100. Supposedly they pack in there like sardines. I keep checking them. I haven't seen much activity, so there definitely aren't that many bats in this one, but they could definitely could fit 100 of them in there. It's about, I believe, 15 inches or 18 inches tall, I believe, those ones. So our bats can really snuggle up in there and fit a big family.
Do you have to design, do you have to put can they be nailed to just a tree, or?
They can, yeah. It's as long as you trust the durability of the tree,
Right.
and that it's not going to fall over on you, it should be able to hold. Sometimes it depends on the area. Sometimes there is a risk of, like, if a raccoon figures out there are bats there, they might come up there and start munching away. But if you put them on a pole like this, usually a raccoon or another predator cannot climb up there. Some people even use those baffles that you put on bird feeders. They'll put those on there to prevent, you know, any predator from climbing up. So that's what's usually recommended, but you definitely can put a bat house on a tree, and it can definitely be totally fine, as long as the bats are not, you know, caught by somebody wanting to eat them. Any other questions? Yeah.
When I was about 10 years old,
Mhm.
when I was outside, my parents were outside then.
Oh. Uh-oh.
So, what does that mean? Did you just,
It depends. Was it during the day or
it
at
was
night?
still light out.
It
Yeah,
was? Okay.
It was during the day.
It's possible it could have been a little disoriented. You know, sometimes individuals do get sicknesses and they might be inactive when they shouldn't be. Other times I almost had a bat fly into my hair once a long time ago. Similar situation, and sometimes they might think it's something they could grab. I have pretty bushy hair, so it was, to a bat, it may have been something that they thought it could cling to, take a rest, and keep flying. So it's possible they thought you may have been something to cling on to before, so it could rest and then fly off to keep feeding. But it's hard to know. Sometimes they do things that surprise us. So we don't always know, for sure. Okay. Any other lingering questions? Good. All right, well, thank you all for coming today and humoring me to talk about this with you. So, hope you all are in love with bats now. Thank you.
So you a batologist?
Kind of. Well, you could say that. I do environmental consulting right now with wetlands, so not exactly bats, but you know, we'll see someday.